The Old Fort Festival was held in Portlaoise recently, celebrating the history of Portlaoise and the origins of the old fort that occupies the town. So this week I speak to two archaeologists on what they know about the fort and what they have uncovered so far in their site study.
Well, I suppose what we think anyway at the moment is the town of Portlaoise grew up from the fort that's in Portlaoise today. The fort was built as a plantation fort by English settlers in 1547-48. So from from that fort and the fortification that's still there in the town, 70% of it is still intact. The modern town of Portlaoise has evolved, and it's quite amazing to think, walls that are over almost 500 years old, they're still there. There's a kind of a square plan of the town that's still intact there, and the modern town, it's very big now, and just to think that it all evolved from the fort is pretty amazing,
So there was basically no town whatsoever. It was just, at the start, it was just a fort and that was it. There was no...
Yeah, it's debatable really. I mean, there hasn't been enough archaeological excavations done yet to prove whether or not that's the case. If we look at similar forts from around the area, there was a fort built in Dangan. The plantation of Laois and Offaly took place together simultaneously. So the one in Dangan was a pre-existing site. There was also a fort built in Loughlin Bridge along the River Barrow. It was kind of like a frontier fort to protect the Pale against the O'Moores and the O'Connors attacking the Pale. That also was a pre-existing site. I'd be a bit sceptical to say that it was just built specifically, and there may be something else there that we haven't come across just yet. There is an older structure in the town which dates to the 1540s, we think. It's called the Stone House on the old maps, and it's located at the back of the Presentation Convent in Portlaoise. It's a round tower at the back of it. So that we think that dates to the 1540s. It looks like kind of a keep, a round tower keep there. But again, there hasn't been enough analysis done on that tower. That predates the fort, so we think by a few years, but we're not sure, But
Okay, a round tower. I haven't actually noticed that myself. Is it impossible to see that?
you can see it. I mean, if you have the the Presentation Convent, it's kind of in a dilapidated state at the moment. At the back of the convent, there's a round part of the tower there. You can see it from the Ridge Road, kind of. Okay. It's covered in kind of 19th century render, so you can't really see the original fabric of the tower. But you can see that it's rounded anyway, and we need to kind of analyse that a little bit more and kind of get a definitive date on that. But we think it dates from the 1540s, and it may have been a kind of an outpost built just before they built the fort. Okay. But the fort was built as a garrison really for the plantation of Laois. It was central in County Laois really. So you would have had a lot of castles around Laois, tower houses around Laois, dating from the 15th, 16th centuries. And the idea of this garrison in Portlaoise was to resupply those castles if they ever came under attack. It also acted as the administrative centre for the county, and it was kind of used. The reason they wanted to bring in the new settlers into County Laois was to kind of protect the Pale in Dublin, and also add to the Pale in Dublin as well, to make the tribes, the native Celtic tribes or the native Gaelic tribes in Laois, to suppress them ultimately in the county and kind of stop attacks on the Pale. For instance, there's a chieftain called Rory O'Moore, and it's estimated that he caused £100,000 worth of damage in about a 5-year period on attacks on the Pale, which was a lot of money back in the 16th century, like, you know. So yeah, the idea was to try and build a garrison, make it more secure for new settlers that were coming in. And now at the moment it's a 3-year study. They're looking at the architecture of the fort, what remains of the fort, and how to move forward then with their plan, like, you know. And I suppose as part of that, I was involved with the archaeology on the site of the fort. So what we were looking at was to see whether there was a watered moat that went around the fort. You'd often see a moat around a castle filled with water. It's a defensive feature. You know, if you've got people attacking the fort, they would have to cross the water, which would slow them down. And then on the top of the walls, then people will be shooting arrows and firing rocks and muskets and all that kind of thing. So, you know, it's another line of defence. So the excavation that we did, our question was there a moat there or was there not a moat there? So we opened up a small little 1 metre by 6 metre trench, 1 metre wide by 6 metre in length. And we discovered after a week digging that there was actually a ditch there, which signifies there was a moat there as well. So this kind of corroborates what we're looking at on the old maps. There's a 1565 map of the fort, and it shows that there was water surrounding the fort at the time. So we found a ditch where the water was with the excavation, and we also found some post-medieval pottery which would date to the period as well. Which is quite interesting. We found a kind of a post-medieval floor tile, which may have been a tile maybe associated with some of the houses that were around the fort. We also found some 19th century activity. There was a smithy on site, or a blacksmith if you like, and that was recorded on the 1841 map of Portlaoise. Right in the site where we had the excavation. So we found cartloads of horse shoes and donkey shoes, and we found a kind of like a kiln type for smelting iron and that kind of thing. We found lots of nails. We found ploughshares where people would have brought their plough to be repaired by the blacksmith. So it was interesting to find those at the site where it was recorded in the 1840s that there was a blacksmith there. And we were talking to some of the local people at the fort, and they can remember, some of the older people, that there was a kind of a blacksmith still there in the 1950s as well. So that was quite interesting, just to kind of get the locals involved in the interpretation of the site. And we also had over 300 school children coming in, and they were really excited about the excavation. And you know, like that's what it's all about. You know, it's bringing the heritage to the children. They'll be growing up in years to come. They'll remember the excavation, and you know, they'll have an appreciation for heritage, hopefully, as a result. You know,
so you're doing the festival at the weekend. So is
That's
that what
right.
you're hoping that everybody will develop an appreciation for
Absolutely.
the fort?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the festival, it's called the Old Fort Quarter Festival. It's really, it's a celebration really of the evolution of the town, and of the walls that are there. Now I know people have different views on the walls, you know, that it's a stamp of English authority on the town and that kind of thing. But the very fact is, like, I mean, the walls wouldn't have been built if for the fact that the native Irish were in the area as well. So you can look on it on both sides of the coin, you know, like that it was a plantation fort, but it was also a monument to the resilience of the Gaelic tribes that were operational in County Laois at the time, you know. So the festival, I suppose, it's a family fun kind of event, and I suppose it's all just about creating the public awareness of what we have in Portlaoise, how our town evolved, the history of the town, and just to get people interested and get the message out there that, you know, we have something to be proud of, I suppose, in one way. But we have, we have our heritage of the town, and it's kind of, it's embedded in the walls of the fort, really, like so.
Well, we're standing here in Shaw's car park in Portlaoise, and we've done a small little test excavation, what they call a test excavation, in the sense of rather than excavate the whole site, we've come in with one research question to answer, or try to get the answer to, and in answering that we do minimal excavation for maximum output ideally. So we've opened up an area. It started off as 5 metres long by 1 metre. It's now been extended 5 metres by 2 metres, because it's actually gone a little bit deeper than we expected, which is fine. So the reason we're here is because we have behind us, you can see the wall of Fort Protector, which is mid-16th century Tudor fort, which was built in Portlaoise as one of the earliest buildings in the town of Portlaoise today. So we're kind of in the heartland of the start of the town. The maps, contemporary maps of 1560, showed that there was some sort of a water body, be it a ditch or a fosse, which would hold either flowing water or just stagnant water sitting in it. And one of the reasons over the years that's become built up with silt and other material. So what we're doing in excavating it is we're trying to see the history of the site and the layers that are in there. So what's the excavation to date, we're still not finished, but what we're seeing to date is that there was a ditch. It's going down, we're down at about 1.60 metre, 1.70 in depth, which is quite deep for Portlaoise. And what we're getting in the ditch, of the ditch fill, we're getting quite nice bits of animal bone. We're getting nice little bits of oyster shell, various different sort of material like this. We've got 1 or 2 nice little bits of wood coming out of it, which have been cut. So that's quite interesting in itself. And then when the ditch went out of use, the site then, they imported what they call subsoil, quite compact soil, to basically seal in the area of the silted material, so to kind of put a seal on which they could build up the site after that. And then you get into the 17th and 18th century, where we have, I mean, we're saying these sort of dates because we have very clear evidence from clay pipes, from ceramics in it, and it's basically layers of activity associated with the site coming up right up to the present day, where we have, I mean, before Shaw's bought this site in the 1960s, there was the Conroy family had a forge here, and we found, it's now been taken off site, we found a lovely millstone, which wasn't actually from the site here. It was probably brought in from another mill, brought in and reused in the forge for making steel rims for wheels. So that was at a very, very high level, not in an archaeological context, it was modern, but that's now been taken off site for conservation, and maybe in years to come, depending on what the site is used for, it might be incorporated in any future building on the site, but it's in safe storage. All of this, I should say, was brought about by the fact that, I mean, we have the street traders, we have a lot of business interests in the town which are very supportive of the overall conservation of the fort. But one of the aspects of that fort, because we're talking about conserving it, we want to know, first off, we need to know as much information of the history of the site, and that's why we've done this excavation, just to get the answer to whether there was a ditch. We couldn't be here today without the support of the legal owners of the site, who are Laois County Council, where they're the legal owners have given us permission to dig. They've also been supportive in terms of funding the excavation, and across the board they've been supportive even in terms of storing the finds that we're getting. Ultimately all the finds go up to the museum, but the millstone is being kept locally in safekeeping for now. And also, I mean, the excavation itself is primarily, I suppose, the work of the Laois Heritage Society. They have been instrumental for years in terms of trying to raise public awareness of the fort and the significance of the fort. And because of that, with the great work actually of the Heritage Officer Catherine Casey in Laois County Council, she saw the value on it and has supported the Heritage Society in doing the conservation plan. And then the Heritage Council, which is at a national level, have financed the conservation plan as well. So it's kind of phases of stakeholders getting involved. So we've got everybody effectively from, you know, the County Council, which are instrumental. We have the Heritage Society, we have the traders and the business interests, but also the everyday people passing on the streets are coming in to see the excavation and are kind of keen on it. And then also we have the expertise, like we have Lots Architecture, who are the conservation architects, we have ourselves as the archaeologists. So, you know, there's a lot of different players. We now have a historian coming on board for what we're now going into the third and final phase of the conservation plan. Dermot Wheeler, he's going to come in and give us a lot more of the history to the site as well. So it's kind of where the story is getting expanded, and ultimately we're trying to get as much information, because the more we can show the value of this site and the significance of the site to the town, I suppose the townspeople see that. It's also significant to the county, but ultimately it's a significant site to the whole nation. You know, I mean, it is one of the few Tudor forts. It was built for the Laois plantation. I mean, you know, this was built to say the planters are here, they're settled, and they're integrating into society, and this is what the town built from.